On the day I returned to the country, Willow abandoned her husband George, who was gravely ill and bedridden, to come see me. At the airport, her eyes were moist, her gaze gentle and tender like water, and her daughter Emma lifted her sweet, adorable little face, looking at me with hopeful eyes as she said, "Uncle, I really like you. Can you come be my dad?" Behind them, George's face was pale, his expression despondent, his body swaying as if he might collapse at any moment. I bent down with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I said, "Little one, just because you like me, you want me to be your dad? Then since your mom likes me too, how about I become your mom's dad instead?" Chapter 01. I had a nightmare. After I arrived at the psychiatrist's clinic, the secretary who poured me a glass of water looked at me with concern and asked, "That dream again?" Holding my emotions in check, I said flatly, "I really can't take it anymore." The secretary sighed worriedly. "Having this kind of dream every single day, no wonder you relapse right after taking your meds." I gripped the teacup in my hands, lowered my head, and muttered in a daze, "One day, I'm going to kill all of them." The secretary jumped in fright and hurriedly tried to calm me down. "Mr. Ito, please, calm down." The clock on the wall ticked away for a long time. Not until it chimed the next hour did I finally come back to my senses and apologize to the panicked secretary. "I suffer from a highly aggressive mental illness, the kind that medicine can't cure. But in the past, even when I had an episode, I rarely wanted to kill anyone. The reason my condition has been getting worse and worse, to the point where I've developed these thoughts, is that starting one day, I began having an extremely disgusting dream. In my dreams, the same story repeats itself, and the same ending plays out every time. A woman who already belonged to someone in her heart married a man she didn't love and gave birth to a daughter. The man was honest and cowardly, restrained by traditional values. Even though he was a rich second-generation heir from a powerful family, he obeyed the woman in everything, constantly yielding and compromising. You could say he was pathetically humble beyond all limits. Yet even so, the mother and daughter treated him with utter coldness. Later, the woman's Prince Charming returned to the country. Old feelings reignited between them, and under constant exposure, the woman's daughter also grew closer and closer to this man. The desperate husband, already bedridden from illness, simply gave up on treatment and committed suicide. Only then did the woman and her daughter suddenly wake up to reality. It turned out that the man was the most important person in their lives, and they couldn't bear the pain of losing a husband and a father. So this deranged woman shifted all the blame onto Prince Charming. She took her revenge on him like a madwoman, destroying his family and ruining his life, until he finally died miserably on the streets. As for her, she appeared to repent for the rest of her life, but in reality, she disappeared beautifully and started a brand new life. My dreams keep repeating this story, and the face of that Prince Charming happens to look exactly like mine. Even the character setup is similar to mine, a rich second-generation heir who went abroad. But I went abroad to receive treatment. Back when I was still in school, I was diagnosed with a mental illness in the literal, clinical sense. It was extremely rare, and even the doctors admitted they didn't really understand it. Their analysis labeled me a hybrid of mania, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. The specific symptoms were, sometimes I want to go completely insane and kill everyone who annoys me. Sometimes I want to make friends with fellow patients and drive everyone else insane. And sometimes I just love watching the show, wanting to see the whole world mentally collapse. The social circle was small, and my parents were terrified I'd cause trouble if I stayed in the country. On top of that, I was sick of putting on fake smiles and playing along with that crowd back home. So I crossed half the globe and went somewhere no one knew me. Originally, my condition had been gradually stabilizing until these dreams started. I'm certain that the Prince Charming in the dream is me, but I honestly can't figure out how I could have rekindled an old romance with a married woman. First of all, I have no interest in married women. I have zero desire for things that already belong to someone else. Second, I don't like women. Don't get me wrong, when I say I don't like women, I mean I'm disenchanted with them. Not that I have no physical needs. I mean I don't place women on any kind of innate pedestal. Of course, it's also possible that I don't just dislike women, I might simply dislike people in general. Lastly, among the few so-called top-tier women I know back home, there's no such thing as old feelings between me and them. So who exactly would I be Prince Charming to? That gold digger who harasses me every day, or that scammy fortune hunter I mocked until she completely snapped, or that girl who insisted on riding in my car and ended up throwing up all over it? I really can't make sense of it, but I can't see the faces of the other three at all. They're all covered by a thick layer of mosaic blur. Otherwise, back when my illness was at its worst, I would have already gone back home and done something illegal. Chapter 02. Actually, there are still a few people back home that I'm on pretty good terms with. For example, Martin Bai, the heir to the Bai group. He's the complete opposite of me in terms of personality, no matter when or where. His mental state is absurdly stable. He's always smiling, always cheerful, just a bit slow on the uptake. For instance, I told him a week ago that I was going back to the country. A week later, he called me and said, as if something had just occurred to him, At the time, I was smashing mosaic-style human figurines that had been mass-produced by a factory. Amid the crackling clatter, Martin didn't sound flustered at all. In his unhurried, laid-back voice, he said, I just remembered something. Makoto, turns out everyone already knows you're coming back. In fact, I'd been investigating who exactly the family of 3 in my dreams were. But since I'd been abroad all this time, my access to information was limited. Whenever I asked my parents about anything related, they always dodged the question and changed the subject. That very night, I noticed a bunch of strange new browsing records on my overseas account. They were things like, details of the XXXX family annihilation case. How is murdering an entire family sentenced? Understanding the killer's psychology behind a family massacre. What to do when your son wants to kill someone. I was speechless. I could see how worried they were, and that their concern wasn't completely unfounded. I had no strength to argue back. Since my parents were a dead end, I could only turn to friends within our circle. And today, that sloth Martin finally came through with news. Slowly, he said, Willow, she told people she's going to the airport to pick you up. He paused for a full 10 seconds before continuing. She has a daughter, and her daughter really likes you. Willow. I narrowed my eyes, a little surprised. I almost couldn't remember her anymore. Wasn't she that girl who used to be bullied by the school tyrant? Back when we were still students, I beat that bully badly enough to get him expelled. Willow even gave me a gift afterward, but the girl back then always wore a gloomy expression, with a hint of self-pity in her eyes. She rambled on about all sorts of strange things, like how anyone who got close to her would become unlucky. It wasn't until much later that I realized that behind that extremely punchable face, she was actually trying to thank me. Coincidentally, I'd just come out of an episode and was in a decent mood, so I told her I hadn't helped her for her sake. I didn't accept the gift either. After all, I tend to dislike people from time to time, and I had no interest in getting involved with someone who spoke in riddles. After I went abroad, my account kept receiving messages. I blocked the ones who messaged me too frequently, but there was one account called Past Events. Although she always sent things I couldn't quite understand, she'd occasionally make me laugh. She was kind of like a digital pet Martin once recommended to me. For example, she sent, I went to an auction today and saw Heart of the Ocean. It was so beautiful. I thought to myself, if anyone could buy it for me, I'd marry him. I replied, what Heart of the Ocean? Sounds like some cheap freebie. Another time, she sent, so happy. I attended a fashion show today and your family's magazine invited me to shoot a cover. I know true love means supporting someone silently. I asked, who invited you to shoot? Then I directly transferred the tasteless idiot to a different position. She would also post selfie updates. Objectively speaking, she looked fine, but those half-revealing body shots and the push-pull flirting tactics she used were just way too low tier. So I muted her outright. It wasn't until recently, when she voluntarily exposed her identity to me, that I found out she was Willow. I never expected that after all these years, her level of narcissism had only gotten worse. I said, all right, got it. I paused thoughtfully. I'm hanging up now. The gifts I bought for you have all been mailed back. Martin sounded a little happy. Okay. Then he asked, do you want me to help you shut down the airport? The airport belongs to his family. Of course I knew what he meant. He was worried about a bloodbath, and was offering to help me destroy evidence in advance. To be honest, I really had entertained the thought of punching someone square in the face. But now, I'd come up with a different idea. I said, no need. I'm not really into violence these days. Chapter 03. The plane arrived at the airport on time. Willow, whom I hadn't seen in many years, was waiting for me in a white Chanel-style tweed suit, holding the hand of a little girl who resembled her in the eyes and brows. With a casual glance, I noticed a haggard-looking man trailing a short distance behind them. Oh, Willow's husband, George. After looking into it, I learned that Willow had already entered high society and built a career of her own. Her rise from obscurity to prominence, marrying up into wealth, was entirely thanks to her marriage to George Wang, the heir of a reclusive tycoon family. The Wang family's direct line was down to only Old Master Wang and George Wang. Like the classic provider husband, George supported her wholeheartedly without asking for anything in return. After Old Master Wang passed away, because Willow felt insecure and wanted protection, he even handed over complete control of the family finances. George was honest and introverted, with little experience with women. After falling in love with Willow at first sight, he proposed to her. To be honest, that whole love at first sight story reeked of deliberate design. After all, it happened when she was being bullied, and George stepped in to save her. In his pursuit of Willow, he simped to the extreme. Every holiday came with transfers and gifts, never missing a single detail of the ceremony. Each payment carefully labeled as a voluntary gift. Before marriage, He put the villa and luxury cars directly under her name. After marriage, he worshipped Willow like an ancestor, revolving around her every single day. And yet, in the comments section of Willow's posts that looked like displays of affection but were really showcases of superiority, women praised this as the standard configuration of a good man, the awareness a real man should have. Some so-called good men even chimed in, saying that the meaning of a man making money was to spend it on his wife. Willow and Emma must have come without George's knowledge. They were completely oblivious to George's clumsy attempt at following them, despite him being such a conspicuous presence. At last, my interest was piqued. I changed my mind, adjusted my expression, and walked toward them with a smile. Willow had mentioned long ago that she wanted to see me. She lifted her gaze now, her eyes soft and affectionate. Long time no see. As for her daughter, who knew what she had absorbed from her mother through daily exposure, despite it being our first meeting, she kept edging closer to me, calling me uncle in a sweet, soft voice. After some dull small talk, Emma held one of my hands and one of Willow's, looked up at me, and smiled. Uncle, I like you so much. Will you be my daddy? The close girlfriends who had come with Willow exchanged knowing looks, nudging Willow with their elbows. I paused for half a beat, staring blankly at the seemingly harmless little girl. Inside me rose a strange sense of recognition, like meeting another patient, mixed with the nausea of having swallowed a fly. At that moment, George stumbled forward a few steps, grief etched across his face, as if he were about to collapse to the ground in the next second, and I finally came back to myself, suppressing the surging anger. Some people argue whether human nature is inherently good or evil, but in my view, human nature, and all behaviors derived from it, are nothing more than facts. Good and evil are judgments imposed afterward by humans. Before being judged, a fact is simply a fact. So for Emma to say something like that, it wasn't a matter of her innate nature. The only possibility was that her mother had been subtly teaching her to say it, day after day. So I kept my smile, lowered my head, and spoke gently. Little one, if you like me, then I have to be your father. Pretending to think for half a second, I curled my lips and said quietly, then if your mom likes me, do I have to become your mom's dad too? The once bustling arrival hall seemed as if someone had pressed the mute button. Willow's sisters, who had been laughing just moments ago, all froze. Confusion surfaced clearly in Emma's grape-like eyes. At her age, she was incapable of understanding the logic behind my words. Willow's expression also stiffened for a brief moment. Even George, who a second ago looked like his entire world had collapsed, had his pupils dilate, his face filled with visibly tangible question marks. Makoto. Willow quickly recovered her expression. Her voice was gentle again, tinged with a trace of infatuation. You haven't changed at all. You still like joking around so much. I replied with a half-smile that wasn't quite a smile. I've never liked joking. What happened within Willow and George's family of three truly had nothing to do with me, but they never should have dragged me into it, forcing me to experience such a thoroughly nauseating ethical entanglement. What did any of this have to do with me? Just because of Willow's ridiculous feelings and trash-tier character, was I supposed to become an intruder in their deformed family and take on the role of the vicious male supporting role? I didn't mind being a villain, but not this kind. Their ending was destined to converge on the same road anyway. Since it would fall apart sooner or later, I might as well tear it apart myself. With that thought, I crouched down and patted Emma's head. Just as I was about to spout nonsense without any burden, a sharp pain suddenly pierced through my skull. My face went deathly pale in an instant, and my fingers dug hard into my palm. This was bad. It was the warning sign of an episode. There was a strong chance I would lose my rationality within a very short time. Willow caught me just in time, as if she had already reached some conclusion. The look in her eyes turned tender and lingering. She explained to me affectionately, I know you mind George's existence, but there's no love between him and me. I was forced to marry him. The only person I've ever liked has always been you, ever since I was 16. My stomach acid surged. I felt like vomiting again. How could someone be shameless to this extent? What did she mean by being forced to marry him? Was someone holding a knife to her throat? She had clearly married him for money, yet now she portrayed herself as the victim, putting on a pitiful act, whitewashing her sordid past as helpless coercion. Absolutely disgraceful. I shoved Willow's hand away, just as I changed my mind and felt like creating some sort of violent incident. George, who had been hiding in the shadows, finally seemed unable to endure it any longer and rushed out. Willow. It should have been a roar, but he sounded as though all strength had already drained from him, his voice barely more than a breath. With reddened eyes, he looked at Willow, who showed no expression beyond mild surprise, and said with a laugh that was almost a sob, Aren't you going to explain anything to me? But in the very next second, Willow said, You actually followed me? I was speechless. Willow questioned him coldly. After a pause, she continued just as icily, Makoto is a classmate I've always been very close to. He came back to the country, So we came to pick him up. I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd overthink things. Little Emma frowned as well. Her childish voice was full of disapproval. Dad, how can you follow Mom? George's lips trembled, but no words came out. His entire face was drained of color, ashen like death. Enough already. What an absurd farce. With visible irritation, Willow said, I never liked you in the first place. You were the one who insisted on chasing after me. All these years of mutual courtesy. I've already given you more than enough face. Her expression was icy, her tone impatient. I'm an independent individual. You have no right to interfere in my affairs, and no right to question me. That made sense. A woman like this, when she has no money, she says, I don't care about money. I care about you. Once she has money, she naturally thinks, I'm not short on money anymore, so what do I need you for? As she finished speaking, her hand slowly reached toward me, trying to hook around my arm. I slapped it away. My temples throbbed violently, the pain unbearable. With great effort, I forced a single word out of my mouth. Get lost. Willow seemed not to hear me clearly. Her lips moved as if she were saying something, but all I felt was ringing in my ears. The world flooded with a low buzzing hum. This was Martin's family airport. I didn't want to cause trouble here. I needed to leave as soon as possible. When I reached George, I stopped and still offered an explanation. Mr. Wong, Willow and I have nothing to do with each other. My voice cut off abruptly. I froze, clutching my temple, and looked at the ashen-faced man in front of me. Gone. The pain that had plagued me for so long vanished the instant I got close to George, as if a gentle breeze had brushed past, silently sweeping it away. The distorted, inverted world in my eyes snapped back into place. The chaos in my mind cleared as though clouds had parted. My body's mechanisms returned to normal. I caught the rich scent of grass and trees in the air. Everything became astonishingly clear. Ever since the year my illness began, I had been trapped in this unbearable pain at all times. The only difference was its intensity. After going abroad, the sensation had been suppressed to its lowest point, yet I still felt like a patient, and I always felt lonely. My family and friends were all here. I couldn't ask them to uproot their lives and move overseas with me. When I decided to come back, I had already prepared myself to endure the pain again. Until this moment, it felt like scraping out diseased bone to heal an injury, medicine applied, illness cured, as if I had finally become a normal person. I couldn't convince myself that this coincidence had nothing to do with George. I looked at him with different eyes and was surprised to find no resentment in the way he looked back at me. He didn't seem to be taking out Willow's behavior on me at all. I spoke. George, hello. I removed my leather gloves, adjusted my glasses, and extended my hand. My name is Makoto Ito. He froze for a moment, perhaps recalling the sarcastic remark I had just made to Willow. Though he clearly didn't understand my intentions, he still reached out instinctively and shook my hand. Hello. The instant our fingers touched, that sense of being healed became even more pronounced. I reluctantly released my grip, oddly nostalgic for that clear-headed feeling of being a normal person. Although the Wong family lived reclusively, they owned quite a number of companies and supported many masters in the carving world, specializing in high-end custom work. When I researched them, I discovered that George himself was passionate about carving. To get to the bottom of this, and to avoid another episode, I made a decision within seconds. I needed to get close to George, and if you want to get close to someone, the obvious place to start is their interests, I said. I'm not close to Willow. We went to the same school before, but we barely exchanged a few words. I continued. However, I've long heard about Mr. Wong's carving skills. If there's a chance, I'd like to ask for your help. George paused slightly, his eyes brightening just a little, but the very next second, Willow said, Makoto, don't bother with him. All he does all day is mess around with useless junk. You're not from the same world. He wouldn't even understand what you're talking about. As if she couldn't understand human language, or grasp my intentions at all, she kept talking to herself. You've just returned to the country. Have you found a place to stay yet? Why don't you live at my place for now? I stood there stunned. How did she even have the nerve to say something like that? Before I could even react, she continued. If you think that's inconvenient, you can also stay at the place in the western suburbs. I have a separate villa there too, with maple trees. The environment is really nice. Of course it was nice. That was the Wong family's old residence. I pinched the bridge of my nose, thinking how utterly unlucky this was. Although my decision to return to the country had been abrupt, my family must have already prepared a room for me long ago. What's more, the developer of the western suburbs land was on close terms with my family. My father had even specially built an estate for me there. I shifted my gaze to George. After a brief pause, I said, I heard that Mr. Wong recently accepted an invitation to participate in a program. In my dream, George not only loved carving but also ran an account of his own, a content creator in the handicrafts niche. He usually posted his own works. During the time I was investigating them, I had even liked that account quite often. George often made pendants and charms for his daughter. His craftsmanship was meticulous, and his style was pleasant, so the account gained decent popularity, enough that a parenting reality show invited him to participate. It was a slow-paced variety show. The guests needed to invite 2 people to appear on camera, showcasing their daily lives. George wasn't part of the entertainment industry, but since he and Willow spent little time together, he wanted to use this as an excuse to enjoy a period of peaceful family life as a family of 3. So he mustered his courage and agreed, intending to invite Willow and Emma. Emma was young and playful, more than willing to be on television. Willow, however, refused outright and even blamed him for being disrespectful, accepting the offer without discussing it with her first. In my dream, Willow eventually agreed anyway, but many incidents occurred during filming. George was mocked for having problematic parenting methods, and was even subtly insinuated to be abusing his child, deemed unworthy of Willow and Emma, accelerating the deterioration of his condition. And among the catalysts stirring the pot, there was no shortage of Makoto, the one trying to steal another man's wife. Perhaps because I had calmed down, thinking about the dream no longer made me angry. Instead, I found it amusing. Very amusing, I said. I've been free lately. You can contact me later. I took out a business card and handed it to George. I look forward to Mr. Wong's call. That was an unmistakably blatant hint. Before leaving, I also patted Emma on the head, my tone carrying a deeper meaning. I said, "Don't you really like me, little one?" I curled my lips into a smile. "Believe me, your opinion will change." Chapter 04. George really did reach out to me. Maybe it was curiosity about his wife's Prince Charming. Maybe it was Willow's request. Maybe it was because, just like my investigation suggested, he genuinely had no friends. Whatever the reason, I ended up becoming the person he invited to show up on camera. Willow messaged me too. She wrote, "Makoto, I know you want to build a relationship with Emma. I'll wait for you. For fuck's sake." But since I still needed to get close to George and figure out why Willow could trigger my episodes, I brushed her off with, "Don't overthink it. If you're sick, go get treatment." I didn't block her. I agreed to all of George's conditions. I only insisted on one thing: stay at my place. He agreed. I had people clean up my manor out in the western suburbs. On the day I moved in, George didn't just bring Emma, he brought a whole group of people too. Stuttering a little, he explained, "These are Emma's nutritionist and her private tutor." I just gave a noncommittal, "Oh, my place is huge." As long as Willow wasn't moving in, I didn't care who came. When the season came and the maple leaves turned red, the hills and fields looked like they were burning, like brocade made of fire. I took George out to the courtyard for barbecue and beer. As he ate, he sighed now and then, saying, "So this is what it's like, one person can live this freely." George's complexion was very pale, but against the backdrop of the maple forest, he looked like he had a bit more color. "Emma clearly loved it here too," she said. "Uncle, your house is so big, way bigger than mine." Then she lowered her voice and added, "And it's bigger than the apartment Mom wanted you to live in." After saying that, she looked at me without the slightest burden, as if she didn't realize that those words might break her father's heart. George, however, only gave a bitter smile. I turned back and looked at Emma with a half-smile that wasn't quite a smile. "Your mom wanted me to live there?" I asked. "On what grounds?" Emma blinked in confusion. "Huh?" I said. "Is that place hers? Did she buy it?" I spoke slowly and evenly. "No and no, so why does she get to act like she can just let me live there?" Emma froze again. She was too young to understand this, but she also vaguely felt I had a point. So she lowered her little head and wandered off to think. After a moment, George said thoughtfully, "Mr. Ito, you're not quite what I imagined." To my surprise, compared to that day, George's reaction to hearing his daughter say something like that was much calmer. I asked, "And what did you imagine I was like?" He said, "Well, there are parts you got right." George Wong smiled. "After all, you're the one Willow thinks about every day." "Mr. Ito, you do look extraordinary." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Mr. Wong, you treasure her like she's priceless, but I have zero interest in her, and I have no intention of wrecking your family," I said bluntly. "I've barely spoken to her. After I returned home, I never contacted her. This whole thing is her one-woman show." After saying it, I regretted it a little. Ever since I started having episodes, I'd gotten used to doing whatever I wanted. I'd practically forgotten how normal people talk to each other. Of course, the real reason was that I couldn't stand how shamelessly he was acting like a simp. I was just about to patch things up with a couple of words when I saw George shake his head. With an awkward smile, he said, "I know. It's just Willow has always liked you." I let out a cold laugh. "You think that's like?" I said. "The Ito family has a solid foundation. It's not surprising she wants to climb onto me, because for a woman, marrying into the right family is the best tool she can use." I spoke without emotion. "Wasn't it the same with you, Mr. Wong?" It was as if someone had struck George with a heavy bell. He stared at me in a daze. What I said wasn't wrong. Willow's so-called feelings might just be a gorgeous cloak a selfish person drapes over herself, while underneath, it's crawling with filthy lice. If she could use the Wong family as a step-by-step ladder upward, how could everything she did not be driven by profit? A person's emotions can't swing that wildly. From my perspective, when I dissected what she did in the dream, it made me feel like she was a black widow, someone who kills her husband to cash in. Would she really obsess over me for years just because of one fleeting impression from her girlhood? If it was love, then why did she marry George? Why did she selectively ignore the fact that she was cheating? Why did her demeanor change completely after George died? Why did she spend all those years carefully shaping her public image? Why was it that, after successfully obtaining the assets of both the Wong family and the Ito family, she could appear to suffer for the rest of her life, yet sit on tens of billions in wealth and die peacefully of old age? Was she really in pain? In her heart, she was probably ecstatic. She took all the benefits for herself, and in the end still forcibly molded herself into the image of a poor, love-brained woman who was just deceived by a scumbag. Believing her would be less believable than believing I'm the first emperor of Qin, I said. But I'm different. I changed my tone and continued. The Wong family brings no benefit to my family, and the Ito family doesn't need to rely on anyone. So my interest in Mr. Wong is purely interest in Mr. Wong as a person. George Wong's pupils suddenly dilated. He froze where he stood. How should I put it? George was really strange. Normally, what man could swallow such a humiliating insult without exploding? Yet he endured everything, swallowing broken teeth along with blood, with not a shred of backbone to speak of. For example, he should have been hostile toward me, but not only did he not lay a hand on me, he didn't even lose his temper. He was still chatting and laughing with me, to the point that I started to wonder whether he had some kind of cuckold fetish. What I couldn't understand the most was this: a wealthy family like the Wongs, already practically at the end of the road and held up solely by the old Master Wong, couldn't afford any internal strife at all. As the last heir of the Wong family, George should have been molded long ago into someone capable of standing on his own, someone not swayed by romance. So why was he such a pushover, so much so that he ultimately ended his life over a woman? A person's mindset usually aligns with their path of upbringing, yet everything old Master Wong did failed to match the logic he should have followed. It was as if, the moment Willow appeared, the storyline of the world was forcibly dragged onto an uncontrollable track. To be honest, I never believed in demons or spirits before, but the older I get, the more I feel that both I and everyone around me are trapped in some grand performance. We're marionettes, our emotions manipulated at will. So many things that defy common sense seem to bother only me. When my illness flares up and I fall into that irrational state, I don't feel like I'm the one who's sick. I feel like the entire world has gone mad, every last one of them. I've never once believed there was anything wrong with me. So, George, what kind of role are you supposed to be playing? Chapter 05. I arranged George and Emma's rooms next to mine. That night, plagued by nightmares as I usually was, I unexpectedly slept very well. In the past, I never needed an alarm clock. My sleep quality was poor, so I would usually wake up as soon as the sky began to brighten. But this time, I wasn't woken up until the production crew arrived and started knocking on my door. Some of the companies under the Ito group are managed by me, and I also frequently accept interviews, so I'm not resistant to being on camera. Heirs of big families are all like this, more or less half public figures. Breakfast downstairs was already prepared, refined and healthy, clearly arranged according to optimal nutritional ratios. This wasn't made by our family's aunties. It was probably done by the people George brought with him. I eat very simply abroad and rarely see such a lavish breakfast, so I unceremoniously pulled out a chair and started eating. Then I noticed Emma, her face pale, poking at the food on her plate with a troubled look, clearly with no appetite. A servant stood beside her and said hesitantly, "Miss, please eat at least a little. This was specially arranged by Sir for you." For some reason, that hit a nerve. Emma shoved the plate away and shouted, "I'm not eating." Then she walked over to me, looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, and blurted out without restraint, "Uncle, I want to eat hamburgers and fries, the kind in the photos Mom showed me of you." I paused. There really was such a scene in the dream. The photos Willow showed her were pictures taken by foreign newspapers of me wolfing down fast food. Later, I took the girl to eat junk food and play at amusement parks, and she decided her rigid, boring father was truly awful, not half as good as me. I do like hamburgers and fries, but that doesn't mean I scoff at fresh, healthy food. People shouldn't transfer their anger onto children whose values haven't even formed yet. She's still far too young, nowhere near being set in stone. And then, the very next second, Emma. George frowned and looked at her seriously. "You can't eat those things." I waved my hand at him instead and asked Emma, "Emma, why don't you ask your dad whether he's ever eaten those things?" Emma looked at George blankly, her small nose scrunching up. It was as if she'd originally wanted to accuse him of something. but now she'd forgotten what it was. George shook his head at me. The camera focused on my face, as if trying to capture this little farce. Thanks to George, my mood was calmer than it had been in a long time. Even looking at Emma now, I could stay composed. I smiled and said slowly, "Your dad is a bit taciturn and not good with words. It's also his first time being a father. There are many things he doesn't understand, so he can only imitate the kind of father he imagines. He grew up from your age too, so however he grew up, he thinks that's how you should grow up as well. So he tends to make decisions without explanation, just telling you yes or no. But his intentions are good. He thinks those foods are unhealthy and not suitable for you at your age, so he won't let you eat them. He specially hired people to make nutritious breakfasts for you. It's not him deliberately making things hard for you, he does it because he thinks it's good for you." I smiled again. When boys like us were little, whoever explained reasons to us didn't listen. From resistance to obedience, it took 1 second. I continued. He might just be stuck in the past. I took a sip of coffee and looked at George. Parents who love their children plan far ahead for them, but who can say for certain that long-term benefits must always outweigh short-term desires. Eating it once in a while, what's the big deal? I paused, then went on. "Emma, don't you want to become a reliable adult? I heard that back in kindergarten. You even taught your classmates how to fold paper. So why can't you give your dad a little more patience, and teach him too?" Emma tilted her head and murmured to herself, "Daddy has never eaten chicken wings or hamburgers either." George nodded and said, "Yes." Emma asked again, "Daddy always controls me, is it because Daddy grew up like this too?" "Yes," Emma said. "Then was Daddy's daddy very strict?" George's fingers trembled slightly. His voice was strained as he said, "No, it was Daddy's grandfather." Chapter 06. It wasn't surprising that George didn't know how to teach a child. In traditional society, what's drilled into men is responsibility and accountability. A father must not be weak, must not show vulnerability. He has to suppress his emotions and become the pillar of the family. As a result, men increasingly shape themselves into providers for their wives, providers for the household. In contrast, traditional society's expectations of women have long since collapsed. Willow didn't need to become a virtuous wife or a devoted mother. Those are altruistic roles that erase the self. Since that was the case, all she would feel was that she still hadn't taken enough, hadn't taken hard enough, and that everything she took was earned by her own ability. So she hollowed out her husband's money and built herself into the image of a powerful, independent female lead. At the same time, she told the child that a man becomes a father in just an instant, lightly erasing years of the other person's contributions. And children, they can usually only perceive what's immediate. They can see a mother's care and tenderness, but it's hard for them to understand provision and responsibility, things that are never emphasized and never displayed. That's why being a parent isn't just about giving to a child, it's also about being close to them. Over the years, in trying to treat my own mental illness, I've read a lot of psychology books. Taming this kid shouldn't be a problem. She's just crooked, not rotten. "Uncle," Emma said after thinking for a long time, "if I take Daddy to do those things, will Daddy understand me?" I replied, "I don't know." I curled my lip. "You have to ask whether he's willing, because when you invite someone to do something, the most important thing is to ask what they want." The young miss who had always had everything go her way clearly lacked even the most basic concept of seeking others' consent. After chewing on it for a bit, she finally obediently went to ask George, "Daddy, are you willing to try it with me once?" George hesitated for a moment before bending down and saying solemnly, "I'm willing, Emma." Emma's eyes lit up, as if she'd just received some extraordinary promise. I rubbed my forehead. "You've never done it either. How are you supposed to take her?" I stood up. "Come on, I'll take you." And so, George and Emma followed me along obediently. I had people buy ready-made junk food, then took them to the back kitchen to make some ourselves with an air fryer, so we could compare which tasted better. Ding! In the noisy kitchen, George was staring at a tutorial and earnestly trying to coat things with cornstarch. When Emma walked over to my side, she whispered, "Uncle, how can I become someone like you?" It seemed Willow spoke quite highly of me on a regular basis. Emma's trust and fondness toward me were absurdly high. I asked in confusion, "Why do you want to become someone like me?" I narrowed my eyes. "Didn't your mom tell you I'm a mentally ill person?" The term mentally ill was clearly beyond Emma's range of understanding. She said, "I think Uncle is amazing. I can't understand everything you say, but it sounds like it makes a lot of sense." After a long pause, she looked up at me dully and asked, "How do I learn so many principles?" I froze. That sensation, the feeling of having some internal lesion removed, that cleansing feeling that made me feel renewed, came back again. This time, its source was the little girl in front of me, only a few years old. I asked Emma, "What? Your mom didn't teach you?" Emma shook her head. "No, Mom said that home is a place for love, not a place for reason." I was speechless. In Emma's world, her entire cognitive system came from Willow. Right and wrong didn't matter, there was only one standard, and that was so-called love. But if that sentence were truly a universal family principle, then it should apply equally to both spouses. So let's flip the question around. Does its implicit meaning also include that men are allowed to be unreasonable and domineering toward women at home? Obviously not. In reality, this phrase is almost always used in only one direction, demanding tolerance from one party, demanding concession from one party. That means it isn't a principle, it's a tool. I asked, then do you think she makes sense? This time, Emma hesitated for a long while before lowering her head. Her voice grew even softer as she said, I don't know. That was normal. The values her mother had instilled in her were already deeply rooted. But if she could interact with more people and access more information from the outside world, she would eventually discover that the normal world contradicted what she'd been taught. Emma was a smart child to begin with. It was just that under Willow's influence, she felt that Daddy shouldn't be the way he was. So she chose to abandon Daddy, and instead chose a new father who fit the image in her mind. That person was me. But right now, what I find even more interesting is this. Letting her abandon Willow after she learns to tell right from wrong, and choose a new mother who truly fits her inner understanding. Willow isn't qualified. She's not worthy. Besides, I also want to verify whether the factor suppressing my episodes has something to do with Emma. I asked, so tell me now, which fried chicken tastes better? I held the bowl and picked up 2 pieces for her. After tasting them, she pointed at one without hesitation. This one. I smiled. Your dad made that. I took a bite myself. The crispy, fragrant crust shattered, and the tender juice of the chicken instantly flooded my mouth. I didn't hold back my praise at all. Smiling, I said, your dad's actually pretty talented. He gets it as soon as you show him. It was as if Emma was, for the first time, really looking straight at her father's abilities. She nodded thoughtfully and said, Daddy is amazing. I asked, so do you think your mom is reasonable now? I continued, that's not something I can tell you. You're smart, you'll have your own judgment. Just like how you distinguished between these 2 pieces of fried chicken. That afternoon, when I took the little girl to the amusement park, I handed her a tissue and gestured for her to wipe George's sweat. He'd just been carrying her on his back to play on the climbing net and was drenched. I said, Lesson 1 of growing up, I told Emma casually, like talking to a friend, is understanding your father, because besides you, he has no one else. Think about it, doesn't Daddy only have you as family? Emma turned her head and looked at George, who was covered in sweat. He was panting from exhaustion, yet his eyes were bright. He even asked, Emma, do you want to play one more time? That was a version of Daddy Emma had never seen before. She stepped forward to help wipe the sweat from him, and in that very instant, the light of the sky seemed to flare. It was as if someone had blown away a thin layer of gray dust from my world. Everything became clean and bright. So that's how it is. I stood up and said, you're a smart child, Emma. I believe you can see it, and you'll figure it out. So that's how it is, I said. When you find your answer, then come back and learn reason from me. Chapter 07. Just like that, the recording of the first episode came to an end. George and Emma went home. I returned to my own place as well, planning to stay with my parents for a few days. But that very night, Martin showed up uninvited. When he knocked on the door, he was already cursing me out. Well damn, you little shit, so you're back and you didn't even come find me, he said. I've been waiting for you for days. I looked at the suitcase in his hand and said, no. I was actually planning to call you over tomorrow. We have all your stuff at my place anyway, why bring luggage? He scratched his head and said, it's a gift for you. Hearing that, Martin's mood seemed to improve. He patted my shoulder, walked into the dining room, and greeted my parents. Martin's here, my mom said with a smile. Perfect timing, we haven't started eating yet. Sit down, sit down. My parents' understanding of Martin is flawed. They've always thought he's cheerful every day, slow in everything he does, and willing to be friends with someone like me who has a mental illness, basically. An honest guy who's easy to take advantage of. What they don't know is that anyone who can become my closest friend is, at heart, not exactly normal either. For example, right now, he was sitting on the sofa in my room, stroking his chin, slowly telling me everything that had happened while I was abroad. He said, Maria got scammed into one of those compounds. Maria was that gold digger with a low IQ, who fantasized every day about marrying into a wealthy family, to the point of even drugging people. I asked, you set it up? I know Martin too well, he said. Yeah, with a calm expression, he continued. Sophia got locked up, fraud-related. Sophia was the shameless scammer who relied on her looks to cheat people out of marriage dowries. Once, one of her victims even attempted suicide, and she mocked him for it. I asked, you did that too? He said. Yeah, he went on slowly. Oh, and Luna, she got caught in an anti-prostitution crackdown. What? Luna was the girl who once vomited in my car, he said. That one wasn't me. One day she suddenly sent me a price quote, probably sent it to the wrong person. Anyway, I just reported her for prostitution. I couldn't hold it in and burst out laughing. I asked, "You cleaned everything up properly, right?" I said with some concern. "Don't get yourself dragged into it." "Yeah." He nodded. "I forgot before. I just remembered now. So I'm telling you." Martin reacts slowly. "And he also has severe memory problems." I asked, "Why go after them?" I said with some regret. "You should have waited for me to come back and deal with it myself." He said, "Your business is my business." I sighed helplessly. "But all this probably makes your memory even worse, doesn't it?" I said quietly. "Martin, since coming back, my condition has improved a lot, but I've also suddenly realized many things." He frowned and cut me off immediately. "Makoto, you're not sick." His voice was low, steady, and firm. It dispersed the chill rising in my chest after I'd begun to glimpse the truth. I continued, "I never understood before why I suddenly developed this illness. Or you, why your memory suddenly got so bad. Why your reactions slowed so much." Only after a long while did Martin show a slightly puzzled expression. I said, "Do you know what rejection reactions are?" I pulled off the gloves I never take off. "We're people who are different from the entire world. We're the world's abscesses, viruses meant to be eliminated, disobedient puppets, insignificant side characters. We are," I thought to myself, "people who want to be ourselves." I said, "Maybe our fate was decided the moment we were born, but I think the one who wrote that fate was wrong. We don't want to act according to his will. So we were rejected." My episodes. Your forgetfulness, nothing more than this world trying to turn us into the same kind of existence as everyone else. Its rejection response does not tolerate resistance. Ever since the year my illness began, whenever I touched people who made me feel an intense urge to vomit, dense red rashes would break out along my arms. It was like encountering an allergen that my body found especially intolerable. My resistance was too violent, that was why I would lose my sanity. My pain, his forgetfulness, all came from the punishment imposed by the world. I said, "Martin, every story has a protagonist, and in our story, all the protagonists are people we know. That's why we loathe them, and when we go after them, our illnesses only grow worse." So I distanced myself and went abroad, and I gradually got much better, until the day the official storyline truly began. Martin stared at me blankly, his expression frozen. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then, in the next second, a tear slipped from his unblinking eyes. It fell just like that, without any expression at all. It was the tear of an actor trapped beneath a stereotyped role, crying for himself. I said, "But I've already found a way." I patted his shoulder and sneered coldly. "Stories can be changed," I continued. "If the protagonist is unqualified, then we support a second protagonist and rewrite the entire world." It seemed like he finally reacted. He said, "George?" Martin couldn't suddenly remember all of this for no reason, and I couldn't suddenly recover either. The only variable was George, this single, flat, almost completely undeveloped character, someone who seemed to exist solely to highlight how despicable Willow was. But I couldn't understand it. Why did a story like this insist on portraying the men as so cowardly and incompetent? Clearly, it was a story about a cheating woman, yet the men never dared to say a single firm word to her, never dared to fight back. Instead, he fawned endlessly, compromised without limits, only to receive more disappointment in return, using deep affection to move no one but himself. I said, "We're going to help him." Then I said, "Martin, this is helping ourselves. We've been friends for nearly 20 years. He never asks me why, and he never doubts me. Maybe our fates were set long ago. Maybe from the moment we were born, we were destined to be comrades fighting side by side." Martin suddenly reached out and tightly gripped my hand. Just like the first time I had an episode at school, when I rejected anyone coming near me, yet instinctively clenched his hand alone. We've always been like this, creatures accustomed to relying on each other, without a moment's hesitation. He said, "All right." Chapter 08. Emma and George were forcibly removed from the program's recording. Willow texted me to question it. This time, her tone was no longer the gentle, infatuated facade she'd put on before. Instead, it carried a cool, reproachful edge. She said, "Makoto, I think your condition has been very unstable. You also said a lot of incoherent things on the show. I'll help you contact a doctor." I knew she was panicking, because after the first episode aired, the online reaction was completely different from what she had imagined. Some people said, "Everyone keeps saying George isn't worthy of Willow, but why does it not feel that way to me?" Yeah, Willow kept saying her husband treated their daughter badly. I thought he favored sons over daughters or something. Others said, "I felt something was off for a long time. She keeps implying that George lives off her." But back when she was showing off their relationship, didn't she say herself that George handed all the family assets to her? Houses, cars, this kind of upside down, absurd logic, and nobody ever thought there was a problem with it. Someone else commented, "She talks trash about the dad to the kid every day, then turns around and says the father-daughter relationship is bad." Yeah, it is bad, and as for why it's bad, don't ask. And then there were comments like, "What's Willow pretending for? She didn't even show up for the program. I thought she loved being on camera the most, now she conveniently disappears." These remarks were half joking, but threaded through them was very real dissatisfaction. What I didn't know, however, was that when Willow once again compared George to me at home and criticized him nonstop, George, rarely, went cold. He frowned and said, "Who do you think you are? Still fantasizing that some rich CEO is going to fall in love with a single mom dragging a kid along? Go piss and take a look at yourself. Do you really think you're worthy?" And then, Emma, who had always been obedient to her mother, actually stood on George's side. In a tone that didn't sound like a child's at all, she reprimanded her. "Mom, it's wrong for you to talk about Dad like that." A husband who had spent half his life being humble finally humiliated her with his own words. A daughter who had always been close to her began to show strange changes. The men she yearned for had zero interest in her, mocking her whenever he pleased. Negative public opinion online surged like a tidal wave. Nothing went smoothly. Everything was moving in the exact opposite direction of what Willow had imagined. She could no longer face me calmly. This time, I blocked her cleanly and decisively, but something still felt off. George hadn't contacted me proactively for 3 days. When I messaged him, his replies were polite but distant. When I asked about the reason for withdrawing from the show, he said he was busy with work and wouldn't be able to see me for a while. Just as I was planning to go check on him myself, an uninvited guest arrived at my home. That day, rain poured down relentlessly. Emma, soaked from head to toe, knocked on my door alone. There were faint bloodstains on her clothes. It looked like she'd fallen, her knee was scraped, her face had abrasions, and she was shivering from the cold. The moment she saw me, tears welled up in Emma's eyes. Choking back sobs, she said, "Uncle, please save Dad." Only after bringing her inside, letting her take a hot shower, and having someone make her ginger tea did I ask her to tell me what had happened. Her small hands clenched tightly together, her emotions running high. She said, "After Dad ate the food Mom made, I was startled, but thankfully," she continued, "he fainted. Then Mom had people lock him up. I can't see Dad." I begged the nanny, the driver, the housekeeper, but none of them would listen to me. She couldn't hear her father's voice. She couldn't see him. He was imprisoned in a locked room. Every day, people in white coats went upstairs at set times to give him injections, and all the messages from his phone were being replied to by Willow. Emma caused a disturbance at home, and Willow simply sent her to live at school. Emma snuck out during the school's midday break. She couldn't find anyone who could help her, until she thought of me. "I understand," I said. My gaze darkened. "I'll go save your dad right now." All of the Wong family's assets had already fallen into Willow's hands. George's only remaining family member in the world had long since passed away. Willow still held the legal status of wife. Making small, dirty moves was far too easy for her. Not wanting to alert Willow, I called Emma's school to request leave. I told Emma to stay at home and not go out. Just before I left, she called out to me, "Ito, uncle." I asked, "What is it?" She said, "I think I know the answer to the question you asked me last time." Emma continued, "I didn't ask Mom. I went to ask my teacher. I think I did a lot of things wrong, things that made Dad sad." I asked, "Then did your teacher teach you that realizing your mistakes and correcting them is the greatest good?" She said, "Yes, the teacher taught me many principles." Her young voice trembled with tears. "Mom thinking about another man is wrong. Mom locking Dad up is also wrong. She has no reason, so she refuses to talk about reason." I said, "Then, Emma Wong, you already have the ability to judge right from wrong." I crouched down and gently patted her head. "You're very smart." She asked, "Ito, uncle, why do you call me by my full name?" I said, "Because in my heart, you will always grow up." Chapter 09. I hadn't expected Willow to go this far. She really was arrogant to the extreme. Unlike her, I've always stayed within the law. I couldn't just barge into their house. I had to think of another way. Martin delivered a crucial piece of information in time. He said, "Makoto, Willow hired a foreign psychiatrist." He hesitated. "If the evaluation report comes out." I was momentarily stunned, then let out a cold laugh. "So that's where she got the inspiration, from me." George obviously doesn't have any mental illness. She just wants him to have one. Faking a psychiatric evaluation report would be absurdly easy. Once such a report is made public, with no one left in the Wong family, Willow would become George Wong's sole legal guardian. She could freely control all marital assets and strip George of every basic right as a normal person. She might even gain a good reputation for devotedly caring for a mentally ill husband. By then, I truly wouldn't be able to see George anymore, let alone help him. I gritted my teeth and said, "That's vicious." Martin was visibly anxious. "Makoto Ito, what do we do now?" He said. "Should I have my people surround their place directly?" Don't act rashly, I said. The Ito family has already put a lot of pressure on Willow in the business world. I paused, then continued. What we need to do now is find something. He asked. Find what? I don't believe old Master Wang didn't leave George Wang a contingency plan, I said. Even if he was controlled by the will of the world, he must have had moments of clarity, just like us. Martin was silent for a few seconds, then said, I understand. I'll look into the Wang Group's old records and their original working team. If old Master Wang left something behind for George, where would it be? After thinking for a moment, I said, I need to go to old Master Wang's cemetery. All right. The rain was still pouring, and the sky was shrouded in mist. I knew which cemetery old Master Wang was buried in, but not the exact spot. So I searched row by row. Halfway through, I ran into a middle-aged woman who was cleaning. She seemed to be the caretaker. She called out to me. Who are you looking for? I said. Aiden. She clearly recognized the name. She froze, then looked me up and down. After a long pause, she asked, Who are you to him? What's your name? It's not a Memorial Day. Why are you here looking for him? I said. I'm his grandson's friend. Her background was unclear. I shouldn't have explained so much. Yet, driven by some inexplicable impulse, I took out my ID and handed it to her. My name is Makoto. I'm here to. What kind of excuse should I make up? After a moment of silence, I said, I'm here to help George. A sentence without context, without explanation, but the woman fell silent. She took a piece of paper out of her pocket, set down her broom, put on a pair of glasses, and began carefully checking something, comparing dense rows of tiny text. I only glanced at it briefly, but I saw that the very first name listed was Willow's. I didn't interrupt her. She looked for a long time before finally letting out a breath, as if relieved. So it really isn't there. I knew my memory wasn't that bad. After saying that, she ignored me completely, turned around, and walked off, leaving behind only one sentence. Follow me. We walked all the way to the cemetery's front hall. From among the many tightly packed drawers, she precisely pulled one open and handed me a small safety deposit box. She said, This is what you're looking for. She let out a long breath. It's been so many years, I can finally hand it over. Holding the light little safe, I couldn't help asking, Was this entrusted to you by old Master Wang? She replied, Yes. He was a strange man. He even bought his own grave in advance. The woman murmured, as if lost in memory. But he was also the most formidable person I've ever met. I once owed him a favor, so I promised to guard this thing in secret, hiding it from everyone. This sheet of paper was given to me by him as well. I remember every single name on it clearly. If someone on the list came, I was to pretend I knew nothing. But I had clearly seen that the very last name on that paper was Aiden. He had guarded against even himself. I asked, Then what if George came? She said, If he came alone, I would give it to him. But every single time, there was always someone with him. Was it companionship or surveillance? The thought sent a chill through my entire body. I lowered my gaze to the box in my hands and said, I understand. She added, I don't know the password to the safe. Only someone who can open it is allowed to take it. I nodded and, almost without hesitation, entered a string of numbers. When did old Master Wang first realize something was wrong? George's parents had died under suspicious circumstances. If my guess was correct, perhaps that, too, was a form of punishment, because they had once been the people closest to George, and the pain of flesh and bone could never compare to the pain of losing one's own kin. The numbers I entered were the dates of their deaths. With a soft click, the box opened. You really could open it. Looks like I didn't wait for the wrong person, the woman said, her eyes lighting up. Old Wang also left a bank book with me, but I need to see George in person before I can give it to him. I looked at the now open box and gently shook my head. That won't be necessary. There wasn't much inside, a thick stack of documents, a letter, and a small note. The note contained only a single line, written in bold, elegant strokes, decisive yet unrestrained. It read, Many years of assistance, words cannot express my thanks. The money was prepared for you. Do not linger. The future is bright and brilliant. Wishing you well. There was no signature, no name, but I knew exactly who it was meant for. I handed the note to the caretaker standing before me, closed the box, and turned to leave. She stood frozen for a moment. Then a choked sound spilled from her throat, but I could no longer see the tears streaming down her face. Chapter 10. The Wang Residence. Ah, Makoto, I didn't expect you to come looking for me. Willow held a glass of red wine, gazing at me with feigned affection. I knew it. You have feelings for me too. Martin, sitting beside me, couldn't help letting out a soft scoff. I simply lifted my gaze toward the tightly locked second floor and asked, Where's George? She said, Him? A useless sickly thing. Willow's face twisted with disdain. He's hospitalized again, I said. You don't need to put on an act with me. I smiled without warmth. I'm here today to take someone back. Willow narrowed her eyes slightly. The stabbing pain in my head flickered in and out. Smack. I threw a thick stack of documents onto the table. I said, "These are records of your past illegal embezzlement of company assets." Another stack landed on the table. I said, "These are your company's previous financial statements. The tax evasion is quite serious." Another stack. I said, "This proves that George holds a shareholder position in the Orange Group." Another. I said, "This is the missing transfer agreement for Wang Corp. You never found this, so George Wang is still the head of the Wang family." The final stack. I said, "And these are George's medical records from childhood to adulthood, certified by authoritative institutions, normal intelligence, sound mental health." Compared to this level of documentation, the psychiatric evaluation you were preparing is laughably fake. You didn't expect this, did you? That family doctor who's handled your annual checkups uploads these records every single year. Martin calmly slid a USB drive across the table. I said, "And here's the evidence that you hired people to kidnap George. Photos, audio recordings, transaction records, everything." With each item revealed, Willow's face grew uglier, darker, more distorted. She stared at the pile of documents and screamed, "How could you have this kind of thing? It's all fake, forged." I spread my hands. "Whether it's fake or not, you know better than anyone." I tapped the table, ignoring the intensifying pain drilling into my skull. "You've already guessed who prepared all this for you, haven't you? You've been looking for it for years, after all." Her expression changed abruptly, but in the next moment, she seemed to regain her composure. She snorted lightly and said, "So what? Isn't my company still George's company? That dead simp, he'd definitely be willing to take the fall for me. Are you really going to send him to prison? And all this about our past? Sure, it wasn't pretty, but we're happy now. As long as my husband doesn't mind. All of this is invalid. The police won't bother with family matters. He loves me to death, far more than you imagine." After speaking, she clapped her hands. "Bring my husband out." The door opened. Disheveled, George walked downstairs. He looked at Martin and me. The dead water in his eyes stirred slightly, then quickly returned to stillness. He said, "Willow." Willow pouted. "Honey, all the misunderstandings between us these past few days have been cleared up." She looped her arm through his and pressed close to him affectionately. "Don't bother with these crazy, irrelevant people anymore. From now on, it's just the three of us. Let's live our lives properly together. Okay?" George looked dazed, but he stared at Willow for a long time before breaking into an utterly blissful, foolish smile. "Crazy, crazy, crazy, crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. They're the ones who are crazy, not me. They're crazy, not me. They're crazy, not me. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Let them all die." The world flipped upside down. A violent surge of nausea slammed through my already fragile mind. My vision flooded with red. I clutched my ears, trying to block out those bizarre noises, until a pair of hands grabbed me and forced me upright. "Makoto, you're not crazy." It was Martin's voice. He said, "Pull yourself together." He released his grip, took a letter out of my pocket, and tore it open without hesitation. He read aloud, "My grandson George. When you see this letter, I hope you are safe and well. By the time you read this, I should have been gone for many years. What season is it where you are now? If it's winter, you must remember to dress warmly. You were always so rambunctious as a child, running barefoot through the snow even on heavy snow days. Grandpa would chase after you, terrified you'd fall and hurt yourself. I hope you open this letter, and yet I also hope you never do, because if you came to see me alone, then you must be very, very lonely. You must have encountered the difficulties I once anticipated, and that's why you thought of me. I miss you too." The pain receded. I looked up and saw new light bloom in George's eyes. He stared blankly at the letter in Martin's hands, as if afraid to blink. Willow frowned slightly and stepped forward to snatch it away, shouting, "What kind of nonsense is this?" Smack. I stepped forward and slapped her hard, then followed up with a few more blows, knocking her out temporarily so she wouldn't get in the way. Martin seemed not to notice any of it. He kept reading. "Perhaps because I am old, because I am close to death, I was finally granted a stretch of clarity. George, do you know this? Every single day in the past, I was atoning for my sins. All these years, I felt like I lived in a fog. When you were little, I didn't teach you how to be a person. When you grew a bit older, I didn't teach you how to become strong. When you grew older still, I grew impatient. I wanted to teach you how to inherit the company, and then I was punished. I believe it was punishment. George, it was as if some strange force wanted me to mold you into someone obedient, cowardly, without opinions of his own. It trapped my education of you with so-called responsibility and sacrifice. I became the marionette. The more I resisted, the less freedom I had. So I often forgot what I was supposed to do, what I needed to do. I believe that was punishment. Your parents died the very next day after I took you into the company. Every day I regretted it. Every day I was afraid. I killed my own son and daughter-in-law. Was I going to kill you too? But I still wanted to ask heaven, why? Why did it have to choose you? The day you brought Willow to see me, I discovered in horror that she might be the one who was destined, but her nature. I wanted to scold you. I wanted to drive her away. From that moment on, I tried to resist, and I lost myself again. George, I still remember that day, when I unknowingly wrote her a check as a meeting gift and told you that as a man, you must protect her, never wrong her. I even supported your proposal to hand over financial control to her. I couldn't break free. At that time, I was nothing but an empty shell. But how could I possibly trust an outsider for no reason at all? The company was the lifeblood built through 3 generations of the Wang family. After a long pause, he continued reading. I failed again. Fortunately, I'm about to die. Before death, I was granted this brief period of clarity. I looked into your eyes. You were very happy then. Willow had given birth to a daughter for you. But was that because our Wang family still had value she could exploit? I know you love Willow deeply, but your grandpa doesn't dare think about whether that love is being controlled, or whether it truly comes from your own will. I'm useless now, but I've left you something enough for you to escape. If one day she betrays you, if one day you wake up and want to leave, if one day you make friends who are willing to help you, then you will definitely come to see me. Grandpa can no longer protect you. But George, all Grandpa ever hoped was that you could become the person you want to be. This life of mine. Martin had been skipping sections as he read. When he reached this point, he paused, his voice trembling slightly. He folded the pages and didn't continue reading what came after. Tucked within the thick stack of letters were many photographs. There were faint traces of blood left on them, as if someone had been coughing up blood while slowly writing. Drip. It was George's tears. His trembling hands clutched the letter tightly. He ground his teeth together, his shoulders shaking, as if something inside him were about to burst free. In the next instant, crack. At that very moment, I heard it, clear and delicate, right by my ear, the sound of something shattering. The world before my eyes was renewed. On Willow's body, it was as if some invisible thing had dissipated. I turned to look at Martin and saw the same stunned expression on his face. This letter has some kind of strange power, Martin said. It feels warm to the touch. I feel like I've become. He seemed unsure how to describe it, but I knew. That letter likely carried the power of resistance, left behind by old Master Wang. Another scar upon the world, I said. We succeeded, Martin. The story had changed. Chapter 11. With years of criminal evidence firmly established, Willow was sent to prison. On the day of the trial, George, the plaintiff, wore a crisp, well-fitted suit. Calm and methodical, he submitted the indictment and evidence materials. Martin and I sat in the gallery. Beside us was Emma, wearing a new dress. She whispered to us, "Daddy looks so handsome." Martin leaned over and whispered to me, "So, does that mean she won't be able to take the civil service exam in the future?" I was speechless, but Emma heard him. She turned to us and said seriously, "Mom did a lot of wrong things, so she has to be punished. I also did a lot of wrong things before, so I should be punished too." After saying that, her expression grew conflicted. I asked, "What's wrong?" She puffed out her cheeks and said, "Mom is still Mom, but if I don't want this Mom anymore, does that mean I'm being unreasonable?" Martin replied solemnly, "You only need to be reasonable with people. Willow doesn't really count as one, so you don't need to." I couldn't help it. I laughed again. Even in such a serious setting, Emma's eyes sparkled. "Then, can I not want her anymore?" She blinked, thought for a moment, and said, "She did too many bad things, and she was the one who didn't want me first." I said slowly, "That's something you need to ask your dad. Let me teach you a second thing. When you don't know how to make a decision, ask your dad." She nodded obediently. George has recently taken over the family business and has been completely swamped. Thankfully, Martin and I have been helping him. Of course, he didn't take our help for free. Not only did he give us shares, he also gifted us 2 wooden sculptures. They were both carved by his own hands. He'd only recently picked up the craft again, yet he'd already befriended several masters and gained some recognition. I couldn't really tell how good the craftsmanship was, but my dad's eyes lit up. He placed them in the main hall and declared with absolute confidence that they were works by a master and would definitely appreciate in value. Emma chased after her dad to ask again about not wanting a mom. I don't know what they talked about, but suddenly she turned back toward Martin and me, her delicate little face breaking into a radiant smile. After court, we went to George's new home. The cook was off that day, so dinner was barbecue, this time made by George himself. Emma squatted nearby, diligently washing vegetables. I crooked my finger, and she ran over. I asked, "What did your dad say to you?" She said, "Daddy said he's planning to invest in making a show. If there are 4 guests per group, then we can film the 4 of us." Martin bit into an apple. "That's not what we're asking. We want to know, did your dad give you an answer to that question?" Emma tilted her head. "He did. she said. Daddy said it's okay not to have a mom, because, she added proudly, I'll have 3 dads in the future. Oh hell, I froze. I said, you can call me Godfather, but you have to call Martin Big Brother. Martin nodded. Then, a moment later, he reacted and snapped. No drinking for you tonight. You're sitting at the kids' table. The sky after we left the courthouse was gray and overcast, but we walked quickly, against the flow of people, walking out from beneath the heavy clouds, until at last we stepped onto a road bathed in sunlight.